The journey began long ago, before any of us. And it was a crazy idea going off the well-worn paths of human history. It required a revolution. Although the Revolutionary War lasted 8 years, starting with the Battle of Lexington and Concord in 1775 and ending with the Treaty of Paris in 1783, we mark the birth of our nation by the Declaration of Independence, July 4th, 1776. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all people are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights. And among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Of course, I've changed the words because we've changed, all people. We've evolved in our understanding. It's been 140 years, after all, so we are now in our 250th year. Our country's founders, like us, were imperfect beings. They suffered a myopia reflective of the times in which they lived. This grand experiment that began with a revolution became one of evolution, of change, of knowing that we do not yet have it right, and of living with the mystery of advancing this project as best we can in spite of it. Once our independence was secured, those adventurers drew up a document that would guide their onward journey. They prefaced it with words of inspiration so that they, and those who would follow, would remember why. Why are we taking this journey, embarking on this grand experiment in democracy? This bold, audacious experiment, which was at the same time soaringly idealistic and deeply flawed. They wrote, "We, the people of the United States, in order to form a more perfect union, establish justice, ensure domestic tranquility, provide for the common defense, promote the general welfare, and secure the blessing of liberty to ourselves and our posterity, do ordain and establish this Constitution of the United States of America." Generations of school children have memorized these words, the preamble to one of our sacred texts of American civil religion. The U.S. Constitution was adopted in 1787 and ratified nearly a year later in 1788. It created our government and, for generations, continued to define powers and protect rights. The main document is the stuff of constitutional scholars, and I apologize in advance to any such scholars in the room. Because while the preamble doesn't technically have legal standing, I would claim it is our North Star. And we need that guiding star, that why, now more than ever. It is what can guide us as we continue on our ever-unfolding adventure. It can help us know when we have wandered off onto ill-advised paths that have tempted us along the ways. It can help us understand when our adventure has become misadventure, and it can keep us moving when we get discouraged. Our North Star can help call us to our best selves in much the same way that our religious tradition and our congregations can. Not surprisingly, Unitarian Universalists and other religious liberals often understand the aspirations of America as having a religious-like quality. Both sides of our tradition, in the forms we know them today, significantly evolved around the time of the American Revolution. Both Unitarianism and Universalism grew up alongside America, and they were influenced by many of the same thought trends. All were birthed in a world of emerging ideas, ideas around democracy, ideas about liberty and justice and the common good, ideas that many of us have come to understand as fundamental but which were at one time radical. And sadly, alarmingly, they are coming to be considered radical once again. At this crossroad in our adventure, we are becoming increasingly aware of the shortcomings of the founders and the path they laid out. We recognize their limited thinking, for example, around equality of race and gender and economic status. We notice that the guardrails that we thought would keep us safe are not as sturdy as we once imagined. We have taken some forks in the road that do not serve us. I recently attended the National Council for the League of Women Voters. It was a weekend of considering deeply what it means that back in April, the League nationally declared a constitutional crisis. 3 months ago, the declaration included the statement, "The foundational principles that have sustained our democracy, checks and balances, the rule of law, free and fair elections, are under direct and sustained attack." The League of Women Voters was founded in 1920 by suffragettes, just as women were getting the right to vote. And it has a radical mission to empower voters and defend democracy. Recognizing our desire for a pluralistic, multiracial democracy, attendees at the council spent a full day engaged in racial equity training. You know, diversity, equity, and inclusion, DEI. We know that the world we dream of will not be creating itself. So here we are, as a nation stumbling down a road which we did not intend to and which looks increasingly treacherous. And rather than stay on a path that does not suit us, we are called to raise our gaze to the guiding stars and redraw our map. Fortunately, the itinerary that we inherited allows for change. The United States Constitution has 27 amendments, one of which undid a previous amendment. Talk about a detour. Imperfect humans like us, our founders left us not a perfect system, but a way to continue the perfecting process. The preamble tells us the why of the Constitution is to create a more perfect union. We've heard it so many times, we might not even thought about it. More perfect? Isn't perfect like perfect? Yes, but always there is more. More perfect then and now, still more room to improve and grow. So we are called to equip ourselves for the next phase of the adventure. The week before I went to the League Council, I attended General Assembly, the annual gathering of Unitarian Universalists, this year in Baltimore. The theme for our gathering was Meet the Moment. There were many opportunities to consider what these times ask of us and to learn the skills and tools that will be needed. One of the speakers was Deepa Iyer, a South Asian American writer and advocate for justice. Iyer is the author of the 2025-26 Unitarian Universalist Common Read. Her book is Social Change Now, a guide for reflection and connection. It's published by Skinner House, one of our UU publishing houses. Based on her experience of community organizing, she lays out in the book a social change ecosystem framework and includes opportunities for pause and reflection. I picked up a copy of the book. I haven't had a chance to read it yet, but I encourage you to consider doing a common read here this year with this book. I also picked up her children's book. It's titled We Are Builders. I also recommend this, both for those who have children in their lives, but really for all of us. It lays out in simple terms the many roles that people can play when it comes to social change. She lists 10, but you can probably think of more. I'll share her list in a minute. These days, people ask me, both as a minister and as a league leader, well, what should I do? And here's what I say. We need all the things. We need all the things. So do the thing you can do with joy and enthusiasm. Because this is a marathon, not a sprint. The thing you can do with joy and enthusiasm is the thing you will be able to do for the long haul. It's the thing that will not only be useful, but also sustainable because it will enhance your life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness. While we know that the price of freedom is eternal vigilance, in a marathon, pacing matters. And so I would suggest that the good life that we all seek to lead, now and always, will be a combination of enjoying life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness intertwined with our joyful and enthusiastic vigilance. So what should you do? That's for you to decide. But let me share some of the possibilities that Deepa Iyer mentions and see if any of them capture your imagination. At times like this, we often think of the disruptors, those willing to take risks and challenge the status quo. And sometimes we think of the frontline responders, those who organize people in communications and resource. At other times, we think of the builders who bring ideas to life. But we don't want to forget the weavers who innovate, who create connections between people and places, ideas and movements. And we also need those experimenters who are willing to innovate and try new things. Of course, we need the visionaries who can imagine and articulate the direction of our North Star. And then there are the caregivers who nurture communities of care and joy and connection. And the healers who understand the pain of the world, including intergenerational trauma, and tend to the trauma that has been created. And let us not underestimate the role of the storyteller who lifts up our community stories, cultures, experiences, histories, and possibilities through art, music, media, and movement. And the last role named by Iyer is the guides who teach, counsel, and advise with discernment and wisdom. There's 10 roles, all of which are important. We need the people out in the streets, and we need the people feeding them when they come home. We need them all, and there is a place for everyone. These are just bumper sticker versions of what each of these roles can be. You are the person who knows or can discover what is right for you, where your joy and enthusiasm may lie. The world has changed and challenges have shifted, but I don't think that our why has changed. I believe the preamble still holds, and I believe it's worthy of our reflection. We, the people of the United States, in order to form a more perfect union, establish justice, ensure domestic tranquility, provide for the common defense, promote the general welfare, and secure the blessing of liberty to ourselves and our posterity, do ordain and establish this Constitution for the United States of America. So I'd like to now move into a time of a little meditation and reflection on each one of these aspirations called out in our vision of a more perfect union. And as we work through these well-worn phrases, I invite you to consider, what do these words mean to you? Does it differ in any way from what you think the authors might have meant? How does it speak to the challenges we have in our nation and in our world today? How might it be supported in the roles we just heard from Iyer? And does it have meaning for smaller groupings as well, our congregations, families, other groups to which we might belong? So let's begin with the first aspiration, to establish justice. What does that mean to you? How has it evolved, not just in our nation, but in your own mind? While our founders may have established clear ways to enact justice according to the prevailing views of their day, they did not have the vision to expand it to include all people, women, those enslaved, all classes. That has been and remains a slow evolution. As we continue our journey, how are we called to establish justice? And what are you personally called to do? And how does that interact with our next aspiration, to ensure domestic tranquility? What does that mean to you, to ensure domestic tranquility? And how has it evolved, not only in our nation, but in your mind? It has been suggested that the founders may have been referencing their hope of keeping peace between the newly united states. Yet there's certainly room for us to consider more broadly what it means to have peace. And it has become clear that without true peace, that true peace is impossible without true justice. Are we, who often prefer to be conflict avoidant, willing to live with discomfort, the discomfort of hearing and truly understanding where attempts to establish justice have fallen short? As we continue our journey, how are we called to ensure domestic tranquility? And what are you personally called to do? Our next aspiration is to provide the common defense, for the common defense. What does that mean to you? And how has it evolved, not just in our nation, but in your mind? The world is a vastly different place than it was in 1788. Communication and technology, as well as growing human population and a changing geopolitical landscape, are things that few, if any, could have imagined back then. Our world seems both bigger and smaller at the same time. What does it mean to provide for the common defense in an uber-connected world? As we continue our journey, how are we called to provide for the common defense? And what are you personally called to do? And how does this interact with our next aspiration, to promote the general welfare? What does that mean to you? And how has it evolved in our nation and in your own mind? Are there ways in which our desire to promote the general welfare, the common good, is sometimes in tension with our attitude of defense? How do we care for an expanding and diverse population with finite resources? What tensions arise? As we continue our journey, how are we called to promote the general welfare? And what are you personally called to do? The final aspiration is to secure the blessings of liberty to ourselves and our posterity. What does that mean to you? And how has it evolved, not just in our nation, but in your mind? Like justice, our founders' view on liberty were myopic, and they have expanded. History has rarely looked kindly on attempts to shrink circles of liberty. Instead, we celebrate the anniversaries of times when freedom was expanded. Over 2.5 centuries, more people can vote, more people can marry, more can make choices about their own lives. And yet today we find some among us who would like to reverse this trend. And so it seems we have more perfecting to do. As we continue on our journey, how are we called to secure the liberty of blessing to ourselves and our posterity? And what are you personally called to do? We, the people of the United States, in order to form a more perfect union, establish justice, ensure domestic tranquility, provide for the common defense, promote the general welfare, and secure the blessing of liberty to ourselves and our posterity, do ordain and establish this Constitution for the United States of America. The founders were describing their why, the reason they set out on this perilous journey that we now continue. The values and vision that they articulated in the preamble to the Constitution still speaks to us today as individuals, as organizations, as a nation, and perhaps as a world. They can speak to us and they can challenge us to continue the perfecting process. Sometimes when something egregious happens, we hear people say, we're better than this. And sometimes there comes the response, are we? Clearly, as a nation, we are still capable of choices that are not in keeping with our highest values. It may not be accurate to say we are better than this. But I do so believe that we must make the choice to say we can become better than this, and then commit to the work to make it so. Our aspirations are beautiful. They guide us as a North Star, even if we never reach perfect. Our journey is not finished, and there's no shame. No shame in admitting we're not done yet. The question given to us is, how will we be better? How can we continue the perfecting process, that audacious journey begun so many years ago? That journey still and always in process, still and always requiring something of we, the people, still and always counting on us.